I'll be real with you. I never saw it coming. 10 years married, and I thought Alice and I had it figured out. Our life was solid. Nice house in the burbs, stable jobs, and we traveled whenever we could. I thought we were just one of those couples who had it all together, like those picture-perfect Instagram posts, but actually real. So, you can imagine my surprise when one night over dinner, Alice drops a bombshell. It started off as any other evening. I came home from work, a bit exhausted, but looking forward to a quiet dinner together. She had cooked my favorite, lasagna, and poured us each a glass of wine. It felt normal, comforting even, until she blindsided me with a proposal that felt like a slap across the face. Out of nowhere, she says, "I've been thinking we should spice things up in our marriage. Maybe try something adventurous." I try to play it off at first, chuckling nervously. "What? You mean like a new hobby? Rock climbing? Salsa dancing?" But the look in her eyes told me this wasn't some playful suggestion. Her face was serious, almost eager, and then she laid it out. "I'm talking about a threesome, Alex. With another man." I swear, time stopped right there. I remember looking at her, trying to make sense of what I just heard. My mind was racing, thinking, where the hell did this come from? A million questions flooded my brain. Why would she want to do this? And why another man? Wasn't I enough for her? I managed to choke out. Why? Why do you want to do that? Is there something I'm not doing for you?" My voice sounded weak, like it wasn't mine. She just shrugged and said something about exploring new experiences and adding excitement to our marriage. But it didn't sit right. The more she talked about new experiences, the less this felt like a spontaneous idea. Her tone was too practiced, too smooth, like she'd been rehearsing this conversation for a while. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my fork clattering on my plate. "You're really suggesting that we bring another guy into our bed? What the hell, Alice?" Her response made my blood boil. She acted like I was the one being unreasonable, calling me uptight and saying I was too conservative about sex. "Don't you ever think about trying something different? Or are you just going to be boring and stuck in your ways forever?" She snapped, throwing her napkin down on the table. Boring? Conservative? Was this the same woman who used to tell me how she loved our sex life? How she felt so connected to me? Now, apparently, I was just some close-minded husband holding her back. We started arguing. The lasagna left untouched on our plates as things escalated quickly. I accused her of trying to wreck our marriage, to ruin the intimacy we had. And you know what she did? She laughed. It wasn't a playful laugh. It was cold, like she found it amusing that I was struggling to grasp what she was saying. That hurt more than anything. I couldn't help but feel like I'd been blindsided, like the life we'd built together was some kind of joke. And then, just like that, she tried to play it off as no big deal. "It's just an idea, Alex. You don't have to get all defensive. I thought we could explore, that's all." But there was something in her eyes, an edge, a glint, that made me think this wasn't just about exploring. It felt like she was testing me, or maybe she was trying to cover up for something else entirely. We went to bed angry that night, the silence between us heavy and suffocating. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, all I could do was replay that conversation over and over in my head. Every time she said new experiences, it sounded more like a cover-up than a genuine suggestion. The doubts started creeping in, one after another. I mean, what if she was already cheating on me, and this was her way of making it seem okay? And why did she seem so insistent on it? Like she was already picturing someone else being in our bed. She turned away from me in bed, pretending to sleep, but I knew better. The tension between us was thick, and I could feel her breathing, shallow and restless. I tried to put an arm around her, out of instinct more than anything, but she shrugged me off, muttering, "Not now, Alex." And that's when it hit me. Things weren't going back to normal after this. Something was happening, and I was starting to realize just how little I actually knew about what was going on in her head. I fell asleep with a sick feeling in my gut, like the ground beneath me was cracking and I was about to fall through. And that's how it all started, just a casual dinner at home, turned upside down in an instant. Looking back, that night was the beginning of the end. But at the time, all I knew was that I had to figure out what was really going on with Alice. Because this wasn't just about some wild suggestion. It felt like there was something much bigger and much darker lurking beneath the surface. And I was going to find out what it was no matter how deep I had to dig. If the dinner conversation was a slap to the face, then what came after felt like a gut punch that didn't stop. Things got weird fast. I mean, Alice and I have had our ups and downs over the years like any couple. But this was different. The way she acted after that night, it was like she became a stranger living under the same roof as me. She'd always been open about her phone before. We'd share pictures, memes, stupid videos we found online, normal stuff. But now she was glued to it, and she was careful, always making sure it was face down on the table or tucked away in her pocket, locked tight like it was a treasure chest holding the world's most precious secret. And God, that feeling of suspicion? It's like a snake wrapping around your throat, squeezing tighter with every day that passes. It started with little things, the hushed conversations in the other room, her tone dropping to a whisper whenever I walked by. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd just shrug and say, "Oh, just a friend," and wave it off like it was no big deal. But the way she said it, with that hurriedness in her voice, made it impossible for me to just brush it off. And every time I caught a glimpse of her screen, there'd be some notification flashing up, and she'd swipe it away before I could even make out a name. It didn't take long for me to put two and two together. There was someone else. There had to be. My mind kept circling back to that dinner, to her bringing up a threesome out of nowhere. It started to make sense in a sick, twisted way. She wasn't just looking to explore our marriage. She was already getting her kicks with someone else, and I was the clueless husband being sold some bullshit story about new experiences. I tried to talk to her, to really talk. I'd bring it up late at night when we were supposed to be winding down, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd open up and be honest. "Alice, is there something you're not telling me?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice calm. But she'd always deny it. "You're paranoid, Alex. Not everything's a conspiracy. You need to chill out." But I knew better. I could feel it in my bones that something was off. Every smile she gave me felt forced. Every kiss was just a formality. She was physically there, sure, but her mind was somewhere else entirely, with someone else. Then, one morning I got my chance. She had this habit of jumping into the shower first thing after waking up, and that day, in her hurry, she left her phone on the nightstand, unlocked. It felt like the universe was handing me a lifeline, and I had seconds to decide whether to grab it. I knew it was wrong. I knew going through her phone was crossing a line, but I couldn't help myself. That gnawing feeling in my gut had gotten too strong to ignore. So I took a deep breath, grabbed her phone, and started scrolling. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There they were, messages with a guy named Daniel. I didn't recognize the name, but the way they talked to each other left no doubt about what was going on. Explicit messages. Every filthy word was like a punch to my stomach, and the worst part was the casualness of it all. They talked about meeting up, what they wanted to do to each other, in detail. And that's when I saw it. Them planning a threesome. The exact same experiment Alice had oh so casually suggested over dinner. Except, from the way they were talking, this wasn't some spontaneous idea. This was premeditated, planned. Every message felt like a dagger, driving deeper and deeper. I scrolled back, desperate to know how long this had been going on. Weeks? Months? The more I read, the more my stomach churned. I could see her typing to him late at night, after I'd gone to sleep beside her, believing we were sharing our lives, our dreams. And here she was dreaming of someone else. And Daniel? He wasn't just some guy. He was the guy. The one she wanted to bring into our bed, to make a part of this twisted experiment. The realization hit me like a brick wall. She wasn't suggesting a threesome because she wanted to explore our relationship. She was suggesting it because she wanted him, and she thought slapping the word adventure on it would make it okay. I felt like a fool. A complete, clueless fool. The worst part was the messages where she talked about me. How uptight I was, how she wished I was more like Daniel. Open-minded, willing to explore. My wife was comparing me to some random guy she met God knows where, belittling me in their dirty little chats. I couldn't read anymore. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I was going to throw up right there in our bedroom. This was my wife, the woman I'd loved for over a decade, the woman I'd vowed to be with through thick and thin. And she was hiding all of this right under my nose, while I played the role of the doting husband, none the wiser. I put her phone back exactly where it was, my head spinning. I could hear the water still running in the shower, oblivious to the fact that I'd just uncovered her dirty little secret. I didn't know what to do. My mind was a hurricane of emotions. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. It all came crashing down on me at once. But one thing was clear. I couldn't just let this go. She was planning to destroy our marriage under the guise of exploration, and I wasn't about to sit back and watch her do it. So I took a deep breath, tried to compose myself, and made a decision right then and there. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet, anyway. No, I was going to play my cards right. If she wanted to play dirty, then I was going to play smarter. And when the time came, I'd make sure she regretted every lie, every secret, and every word she'd typed to Daniel. This wasn't just about Alice and Daniel anymore. This was about me reclaiming control, making sure that whatever game she thought she was playing, I'd be the one who had the final say. Because if Alice wanted to throw our marriage into chaos, then she better be ready for the storm I was about to bring. Once I found those messages on Alice's phone, there was no turning back. I felt like the blinders had finally come off, and I was seeing everything for what it truly was. The lies, the secrets, the manipulation, it all started to fall into place. But instead of confronting her right away and giving her the satisfaction of some dramatic showdown, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the idiot who lost control. No, if Alice wanted to mess around behind my back, then I was going to make sure she knew exactly what it felt like. The trick was to keep everything looking normal on the surface. I didn't want to tip her off, so I played it cool, almost too cool. I'd wake up, go through the motions, kiss her good morning like nothing had changed, and pretend like I was none the wiser. But each touch felt empty, hollow. My heart wasn't in it. And it didn't take long for the distance to settle between us like a dark cloud. But Alice didn't seem to care, or maybe she was too caught up in whatever fantasy she had going on with Daniel to notice. Either way, it gave me the space I needed to start working on my plan. It's funny, when you realize someone's betraying you, it changes your perspective on everything. I found myself watching her more closely, catching the way she'd smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, the late nights she'd spend in the living room watching TV when really she was texting him. But instead of rage, I started to feel a cold detachment, like I was studying her, getting ready to pull the rug out from under her feet. Weeks went by like this, and the emotional distance between us just kept growing. We stopped talking about anything meaningful. It was all surface-level stuff. How was work? Fine. What's for dinner? Don't know, you pick. That kind of mindless small talk that fills the silence, but doesn't say anything. I could see it in her eyes. She thought she'd won, that she was pulling one over on me. But the joke was on her. And then one night things changed. A buddy of mine invited me out to a bar. A reunion of sorts with some old friends I hadn't seen in a while. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. But when I thought about staying home with Alice, pretending to be the clueless, loving husband while she was likely off planning her next hookup with Daniel, it was an easy decision. I needed to get out, to breathe. And that's when I met them, Olivia and Isabel. It was one of those nights where you don't expect much, just some beers and laughs to take the edge off. But then they walked in, and everything changed. Olivia had this wild energy, the kind that lights up a room. And Isabel? She had this quiet, confident allure about her that drew you in. I don't know if it was the alcohol or the way I'd been feeling for weeks, but when they came over to our table and started chatting, I felt alive for the first time in a long while. At first, the conversation was light, friendly, typical bar banter. But as the drinks kept coming, things got flirty. Really flirty. And I'll be honest, it felt damn good. It felt like I was being seen again, like I was wanted, something I hadn't felt with Alice for God knows how long. The more we talked, the more I realized there was this spark, an attraction that was impossible to ignore. By the end of the night, Olivia and Isabel made it clear they weren't just looking for casual conversation. They were interested in me, in each other, and in something more than just small talk. They were bold, confident, and unafraid to speak their minds. And for the first time since that disastrous dinner with Alice, I felt like I had control. I felt like I could make a choice. So I did. I took a risk and decided to start something with them. It wasn't about love or romance or anything deep like that. It was about freedom. It was about doing something for myself for once, instead of constantly worrying about Alice and her crap. I felt like I was taking back a piece of myself that had been missing for far too long. And I didn't do it blindly. I had a purpose. It didn't take long for things to heat up between me, Olivia, and Isabel. We'd meet up whenever we could, sometimes together, sometimes separately. It was messy, thrilling, chaotic, but damn, it was fun. I'd go out with them, lose myself in the excitement, and for those hours, I didn't think about Alice or her lies or Daniel. It was like I was living a double life, and for the first time, it felt like I was winning. But I wasn't just doing this to get back at Alice. No, I had a plan in mind, a way to make sure she got what was coming to her. I talked to Olivia and Isabel about recording our encounters. It wasn't an easy conversation, and I was upfront about why I wanted to do it. Surprisingly, they were both on board. Maybe they'd been burned before too, or maybe they just didn't care about the drama. Either way, they agreed to help me with what I called my insurance policy. Every time we'd meet, we'd make sure to record it. Not some grainy, half-assed video. No, we did it right. Clear, undeniable footage that showed everything in vivid detail. It was weird at first having that camera there, but after a while, it just became part of what we did. And knowing that I had these videos, knowing that I had this secret weapon to use against Alice, it gave me a sense of power that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I knew it wasn't the most honorable thing to do. Hell, part of me hated myself for stooping to her level. But at the same time, I couldn't let her get away with it. I couldn't let her destroy our marriage, play me for a fool, and then walk away like she was some kind of innocent victim. If she wanted to play dirty, then I'd show her just how dirty things could get. And so, day by day, week by week, I played the role of the loving husband, all while keeping my secrets locked away. I'd smile at her, laugh at her jokes, pretend like everything was just fine. But in my head, I was counting down the days until I'd be ready to make my move. To show her exactly what she'd done, and make sure that whatever fantasy world she thought she was living in came crashing down around her. Because the thing about revenge is it's best served cold. And when the time came, I was going to make sure she felt every icy second of it. The days that led up to that final confrontation felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at the chaos below, knowing you're about to jump. I was done pretending, done playing the role of the clueless husband, done being the guy who turned a blind eye to his wife's bullshit. The videos were ready, my resolve was steel, and the countdown to the end of our marriage had officially begun. Alice didn't know it, but that night was going to be the last time she came home to things as they were. She walked in like any other day, dropping her bag on the counter, kicking off her shoes, not a care in the world. I'd already queued up the videos on my phone, each one a carefully recorded snapshot of my time with Olivia and Isabel. Moments that would tear down whatever fantasy Alice had been living in. She barely said hello before heading upstairs to change. And that's when I did it. I sent the text. No words, just a link. The videos started sending one after another, the tiny progress bar creeping across my screen like a slow, deliberate countdown. I could almost see her face as she'd read the messages. At first, confusion, then disbelief, and finally, that gut punch realization of exactly what she was looking at. I waited. It was only seconds before I heard her phone ping from the other room. I didn't say a word, just listened as she walked back downstairs, her steps slowing as the notifications went off one by one. Ping, 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 and then silence. That thick, heavy silence that fills the air when something terrible is about to go down. It didn't take long. She saw the videos. I heard her scream from the living room, this raw, guttural sound that seemed to come from deep inside her. "Alex, what the fuck is this?" she yelled, storming into the room, phone clutched in her shaking hand, eyes wild and furious. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, looking her dead in the eyes as she held the phone up to my face, as if trying to make me explain the very thing I'd sent her. "Oh, that?" I said, keeping my voice calm, almost casual. "Just thought you'd like to see what exploration looks like." She was livid, and honestly, I'd never seen her like that. Her face was red, eyes tearing up, and she was shaking with rage. "You son of a bitch," she spat. "You're cheating on me? You're fucking other women behind my back? How could you do this to me?" She was screaming so loud, I was sure the neighbors could hear. But I didn't care. Let them hear. Let the whole world hear. I stood up, finally letting all the anger I'd held back for weeks boil to the surface. Cheating on you? I shouted back. Really, Alice? That's rich, coming from someone who's been screwing around with Daniel. Who's been planning to bring another man into our bed and call it a threesome. You think I didn't know? You think I'm stupid? She froze. For just a second, I saw it. That flash of guilt, that moment of fear in her eyes where she knew she was caught. But she didn't back down. That was different, she yelled, the defiance coming back to her voice. That was about us. About trying to fix things, trying to spice up our marriage. It wasn't like this. It was a betrayal. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, angry laugh that came from the deepest part of my chest. Fix things? You wanted to fix things by screwing another guy? And you think that makes you innocent? I was shouting now, pacing the living room as she stood there, clutching her phone like it was some kind of shield. Spare me the bullshit, Alice. You weren't trying to spice things up. You were looking for an excuse to fuck around. And you thought calling it an experiment would make it okay. Shut up, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. Just shut up, Alex. You don't understand anything. You don't know what it's like to feel trapped in a marriage where you're not getting what you need. You don't know how hard it's been. Yeah, I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And screwing some guy on the side was your solution? Jesus, Alice, you could have just talked to me. But no, you went behind my back, lied to my face, and expected me to just play along like some idiot. She broke then. The tears came harder, and she sank onto the couch, her hands shaking as she tried to find the words. I'm sorry, she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to do. I thought if we tried something new, save it. I interrupted. It doesn't matter anymore. You made your choice. You chose to lie, to cheat, and to destroy whatever trust we had left. So don't stand there and play the victim. You don't get to do that. The argument raged on, both of us throwing accusations, yelling over each other, digging up every wound from the past 10 years that we'd never truly dealt with. Every word felt like a knife, cutting deeper into wounds that were already raw and bleeding. And in that moment, it was like all the love, all the history, all the shared memories were drowned out by the anger and betrayal. There was no way back from this. No apologies, no makeups, no let's work it out. Eventually, we were both spent. She sat there, sobbing into her hands, while I stood across the room, staring at the wall like it held some kind of answer. And that's when the words came out. Not in anger, not as a threat, but as a quiet, undeniable truth. I want a divorce. She looked up, eyes red and swollen, her face a mess of tears and anger and hurt. Is that really what you want? She whispered, her voice breaking. After everything, we're just going to end it. There's nothing left to save, I said, feeling the weight of the words settle over me like a blanket. You've made sure of that. And that was it. The decision was made, the line was drawn, and whatever future we might have had together crumbled to dust. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how the divorce would go, who would get what, or how we'd ever untangle the lives we'd built together. All I knew was that it was over, and whatever happened from here on out, it would be on my terms, not hers. I walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her tears, her lies, and whatever regret she might have had. And as I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange, empty calm settle over me. The storm had come and gone, and all that was left was the wreckage. But at least now, I knew exactly where I stood, and I was ready for whatever came next. After our showdown, Alice and I lived in a weird limbo. We were like two strangers sharing a house, and every day felt like a ticking time bomb. I knew things would get ugly, but I didn't expect her to take it to the next level. Yet in a way, I shouldn't have been surprised. After all, she was angry, hurt, and desperate for payback. And I'd handed her exactly the ammunition she needed. It started a few days later. I woke up one morning to a flood of messages on my phone, texts, missed calls, notifications blowing up my social media. And I knew, before I even opened a single one, I knew she'd done something. My heart pounded as I braced myself for the fallout. And sure enough, there was the videos. The same videos I'd sent to Alice, the proof of my time with Olivia and Isabel, sent out to our friends, acquaintances, even her family. It was like she'd been waiting, watching for the perfect time to pull the pin on the grenade and blow my world apart. The messages were brutal. At first, there was shock. Friends asking me what the hell was going on, people who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly interested in my personal drama. And the comments, God, the comments, everyone had something to say. What's your side of the story, man? How could you do that to Alice? You're disgusting, cheating on your wife like that. I'll be honest, for a minute, it felt like the walls were closing in. My phone buzzed nonstop. Every notification another punch to the gut. Every call another reminder of how quickly things could spiral out of control. I could practically hear the whispers behind my back, the clinks of gossip being poured like wine at every social gathering we'd ever been part of. For a second, I actually thought she'd won, that she'd managed to humiliate me, to make me the villain in this whole mess. But then something happened that I didn't expect. The dust started to settle, and I started to hear the other side, the support. And it came from places I didn't see coming. A couple of friends reached out, not to condemn me, but to laugh. Bro, I had no idea you had it in you, one guy texted. Can't say I blame you, said another. Alice was always a bit much, huh? It was surreal, like this world I thought would turn against me was actually kind of on my side. Some of the guys even called me a legend, and though they said it jokingly, there was this weird sense of solidarity. One of my buddies, who'd known Alice for as long as I had, told me straight up that he'd always thought she was too controlling, that she'd been playing the victim for way too long. And to my surprise, a few of the women in our circle even reached out, some privately telling me they understood why I'd done it, that they saw how Alice had been pushing boundaries and disrespecting our marriage. The more I heard, the more the shame melted away, and with it the guilt. I started to realize that this wasn't as black and white as I'd thought. Sure, I'd gone behind her back. I'd slept with other women. But it wasn't like I'd done it for kicks. I'd done it to survive, to claw back some dignity in a marriage that was rotting from the inside out. I think what really drove it home was a conversation with one of my closest friends, Jake. He called me up one night, right when I was drowning in all the chaos. Look, man, he said, his voice calm but firm. I know you're probably feeling all sorts of crap right now, but let me tell you something. What you did, it wasn't pretty, but it was justified. You didn't ask for this. You didn't start this mess. She dragged you into it with her lies, and you did what you had to do. Those words stuck with me. They made me rethink everything, not just the last few weeks, but the last few years. All the times I'd bent over backward to make Alice happy. All the times I'd let things slide to keep the peace. All the sacrifices I'd made for a woman who clearly didn't give a damn about my happiness. And suddenly, it all felt lighter, like I'd been carrying this weight for so long that I'd forgotten what it was like to just be free. Even when I saw the fallout, the messages Alice sent me, accusing me of ruining her life, of making her the laughingstock of our social circle, I couldn't find it in me to care anymore. Every insult she threw at me, every desperate attempt to claw back some semblance of control, just made it clearer that I'd done the right thing. I'd cut the strings that tied me to her, and there was no going back. She tried to play the martyr, to paint herself as the poor, betrayed wife who'd been wronged by her cheating husband. But as much as she tried to rewrite the narrative, the truth was there. In the messages with Daniel, in the lies she'd told, in the ways she'd planned to turn our marriage into a personal playground while I was supposed to sit back and play the good husband. And for once, I didn't care what people thought. I didn't care who saw the videos, who judged me, who whispered behind my back. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life. Not the life Alice wanted me to live. Not the life I'd been pressured into, but my own. And it felt damn good. So yeah, maybe I wasn't the perfect husband. Maybe I made mistakes. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Because that scandal, that public explosion of our private mess, it gave me a chance to start over. To find myself again. And to realize that life after Alice wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to embrace, something to celebrate. And as for Alice, she was just a chapter in a story that was already moving on. Once Alice spread the videos and the drama hit our social circle, I knew it was time to close the chapter on us for good. The scandal had put everything in the open, and there was no point pretending anymore. I filed for divorce. It was one of those decisions that seemed simple in my head but turned out to be a long ugly fight in reality. The divorce proceedings were hell. Every conversation felt like walking through a battlefield. Alice was relentless. She wanted it all: the house, the money, anything she could use to punish me for daring to break away. She came at me hard, her lawyer throwing out demands and accusations like confetti. It got to the point where I almost didn't recognize the woman I'd been married to for over a decade. But I kept my cool. I knew what I wanted: freedom. And the only way to get there was to stay the course, no matter how many times Alice tried to drag me back into her mess. And I wasn't alone. Olivia and Isabel were there for me every step of the way. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. They were my friends, my confidants, the people who reminded me that life could be better without all the lies and manipulation. They pushed me to focus on myself, to see the divorce not as a failure, but as a new start. And so I did. As the legal battle raged on, I slowly started to rebuild my life. I threw myself into hobbies I hadn't touched in years: guitar playing, hiking, and even cooking, which Alice had always dominated in our marriage. I started to travel, sometimes on a whim, booking trips to cities I'd never been to, taking time to enjoy experiences that had nothing to do with anyone else but me. I was finally living for myself, not for the approval or expectations of someone who never really saw me. Of course, Alice kept trying to make it hell for me. She'd send angry messages, saying how I was the one who ruined her life, who dragged our marriage through the mud. But every time she threw another insult my way, it only confirmed that breaking away was the right decision. I wasn't angry at her anymore. I was just done. Somehow, through all the mess and the noise, I found peace. The day the divorce was finalized was the day I truly felt free. It was like walking out of a dark room and finally seeing the sun again. And all the guilt, all the shame that I'd felt for going behind her back with Olivia and Isabel, for exposing her lies, it started to dissolve, replaced by the realization that I deserved better than to live under someone else's shadow. I realized that I wasn't the villain in my own story. I was just a guy trying to reclaim his life. And that's exactly what I did. I started saying yes to things I'd always held back on: new adventures, new people, new beginnings. My friends saw it too. They could tell I was different, lighter, more alive. And while I couldn't change what happened, I could move forward one step at a time. So yeah, maybe it wasn't the cleanest break. Maybe Alice would always paint herself as the victim, and maybe some people would believe her. But I didn't care anymore. I was free, truly free, to be who I was, to live the life I wanted without the baggage of lies and betrayal. And that was the best revenge of all: living well, living honestly, and leaving all the toxicity far behind me. Here's to a fresh start, to moving forward, and to never looking back.